Tēnei rā pai. Whakatakitanga o ki tūru, whakatakitanga o ki te tomo. Ke mākere ki ngā kiuta, ke mātawai ki tawe. E hia he o te ata kura, he ko he teo haumi e hui e tārai.
So tēnā koutou e katoa, nā mai hari mai ki tēnei hui, ko Scott Tupawengo. Hello everyone and welcome to Hearing 12, which concerns all things related to heritage areas, heritage overlays, sites of significance to Māori, the Kororareka Township Zone and notable trees as part of the proposed Whanau District hearings. My name is Robert Scott, I'm the chairman for these hearings, and with me we have Councillor Hilda Harawira, Commissioner Siani Walker and Commissioner Kensington. So this is a hearing, I'll get through the formalities. This is a hearing under the Resource Management Act 1991 to consider submissions and further submissions on the proposed Whanau District Plan. We are appointed by the Whanau District Council as independent hearing commissioners to hear submissions and to make recommendations to the Council on any changes to the district plan as it was notified. We are not intending to issue interim recommendations at this stage, and we will be hearing all submissions before issuing a complete set of recommendation reports. That said, we intend to hold interim deliberations as we proceed and at the conclusion of each hearing topic. Just a quick introduction to myself. My background is in town planning and resource management. I've been a planner since 1992 and an independent commissioner since 2014. I mainly practice in Auckland and the North Island and in Queenstown. I'm a commissioner for the Gisborne Tairāpiti District Council, Christchurch City, Tauranga City and Bay Plenty Regional Council. I'll just get the other panel members to briefly introduce themselves, starting with Commissioner Walker.
Kia ora tātou, e Siani Walker tēnei, he uri o Whanau, ko te Aotearoa Whakarangi, ko Ngāti Rangi ki Kahuamanga, te Raupuri, ko Ngāti Tamapūpiri, Rawa ko Tātukirau, te Raupuri, Ngāti Kau ki Whanau, So I'm a planner by profession and hearing commissioner here in regards to sites of significance, also with my planning background and expertise. So kia ora, look forward to hearing from this today.
Tēnā tātou, ngā mihi kia tātou, ngā mihi mo te karaki e tēnei ata. Nau mai hara mai ki tēnei wāhi rangatira o te tai tukirau ki Waitangi. Ko Hilda Harawira ahau, he uri no muri whenua no Ngāti Hau o Whangapuni ki te Rarawa. He uri hoki o Ngāpuhi nui tonu o Ngāti Whātua. No reira, tēnā koutou, he kaikaunihira Māori ahau. Hari ko tai mai i tēnei rā tātou ki ngā kaikomi hana hau, nau mai hara mai hoki ki waingini a tātou, ki aku hoa mahi, ko tō mātou mahi, hei hakarongo, e ata wānanga peahanga kaupapa e takotohia ki mua te aroaro o te katoa. So, so nice to be here, kia ora rā.
Tēnā koutou, ko Peter Kensington, Papuinga. I'm originally from the Manawatu, but currently live in Muriwai Beach on Auckland's north-western coastline. I am a qualified planner and landscape architect, and have a small consultancy where I work myself.
Thank you. For those of you who haven't been to a district plan hearing before, I'll just quickly go through the process that we follow. The usual process is We have an introduction of the planning chapters and topics that we're about to hear from our extensive planning team here. And they will introduce themselves in a moment. And then we'll call on those submitters that are on this list to present their evidence and submissions to us. We can ask questions of you, and we encourage you to ask questions of us if you have any questions of that nature. But you, yes?
Do you ask the questions after I've presented my submission or during?
I know, well, usually after.
Thank you.
If you would prefer that,
I
find, what I'll say is sometimes when we get sort of really experienced lawyers and planners, I might jump in because they're used to that. But if you're new to this, and if you are what we call a lay submitter, and we don't mean that pejoratively, if you're a person who's not an expert, we usually don't try to break the style. We get it all out, and then we'll ask you some questions afterwards. So I hope that gives you some comfort.
Thank you.
We want to run these hearings informally, and we're really just interested in what your views are, and that's why I say we want to have information going backwards and forwards. The questions we will usually tend to ask is to understand your submission better, not to have a go at your credibility or things that you said. It's really to understand. So I hope that gives you some comfort. Yeah, and so all the questions will come through myself. I'll invite the other commissioners to potentially ask some questions of clarification. It may be that some of the planners will ask me for a question of clarification, and we'll do that only if necessary. We just have to deal with the housekeeping matters, and we'll ask our very accomplished hearing administrator, Alicia Kate, to go through that.
Good morning, everyone. So just from a housekeeping perspective, the bathrooms are through this door, which you can also access by going out that external door and round. In the event of a fire evacuation, so you head out either of these doors and head up towards the way you came in, and we gather at the memorial gate. That gate will be unlocked, so you don't need to, we're not going to hold you in here. If everyone can just make sure they turn their cell phones onto silent. We are recording today's session, and it will go onto the website later this evening. So just be aware of that, and we do have a fairly sensitive camera audio in here. Yeah, aiming to break at 10:30 and 1:30 today.
Right, now I don't think we have any procedural matters that we need to discuss. I will be saying something about some culturally sensitive evidence tomorrow, but that's not relevant to today's proceedings. No other procedural matters that we need to discuss. But we'll get the council to introduce themselves before they start. Let's start off.
Kia ora koutou, ko James Takunua. I'm the team leader of the district planning team.
Good morning, my name is Chloe Mackay. I'm the policy planner in the district planning team.
Kia ora koutou, my name is Takunua, Melissa Pearson. I'm a principal planner with SLR Consulting, and I'm acting on behalf of the Farmers District Council for the historic heritage topics.
Kia ora koutou, ko John Byrne, the Toko Ingoa. I am of Planning Heritage, and I'm the Heritage Advisor and Consultant on this topic.
Thanks, Council. I'm Joyce Rebecca and hi. Yeah, I'm really thank you. I hope that we next to the okay. I'm a senior planner, policy planner in the district planning team.
Atamari koutou, I'm not a councillor. My name is Nina Haruhi. I am a certified independent environmental commissioner. 2024, I've come down on the advice of a mentor to come and observe and expose myself to the process. So hopefully I can one day be on the panel. I volunteered my time and my expenses to be here, and I'm very happy to be here. In my day-to-day life, I am a hapu cultural and environmental monitor. I do a lot of resource consent response, and I hold basically council, planners, construction records, anything that's happening in our hapu, I'm there on site in mind. Good koutou. Manager of integrated planning and manager for the district plan team, and also our growth planning.
Very good. And we'll get all the submitters to introduce themselves as they come up to speak. So everybody knows everybody who's here. We'll just hand it over to Council now to introduce the topics. You've got a PowerPoint presentation, I understand. Are you going to lead off?
I am.
Pearson? Well, we'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So this morning I'm starting off because I've probably got the lion's share of the topics this morning. So I'll be starting off by introducing the two historic heritage chapters, the heritage wrong. Oh no. Recording, we're good. Yes, as you were, as I was, all right. And then I will hand over to Teresa Burkhart to talk through the sites and areas of significance to Māori topic. Then I'll hand over to Chloe Mackay for the notable trees topic, and then give myself a bit of a break, and then I will come back in at the end with the Kororareka Russell Township Zone. Let's see if the clicker works.
You've got it on it.
It's on, yeah.
What old-fashioned me.
I think it's you again. With well intentioned. So for each of the topics, we'll do a bit of an overview of the submissions. We'll be highlighting the key matters for consideration and key recommendations. If we go to the next slide, I'm going to do a little bit of an overview of just the structure of how these four chapters work together, because it's not necessarily entirely intuitive. It's still where to find bits and pieces. So just for everyone's benefit, just to talk you through that. I just thought I'd start off with the definition of historic heritage. This is the definition from the PDP, but it's got the same meaning as Section 2 of the RMA. And really all of the chapters that we're looking at, the heritage area overlays, the historic heritage chapter, which primarily deals with scheduled heritage resources, the sites and areas of significance to Māori, and the noble trees chapter, all of these fall under the umbrella of historic heritage. So if I'm talking about historic heritage, I'm sort of talking about all of them, but there are also some aspects of the Kororareka Russell Township Zone that cross over into these areas, but I'll be talking about that at the end, and I'm actually going to talk about the Kororareka Russell Heritage Area Overlay at the end as well with that, because they're really the two active here, so I'll be dealing with that at the end. Next slide, please. So all of these four chapters, they all sit in part 2 in the historic and cultural values section. And the two that really work the most closely together are the Heritage Area Overlay chapter and the Historic Heritage chapter. The goal really with these two chapters and my recommendations was to make them talk to each other better, specifically with managing and protecting scheduled heritage resources, because the idea being that if it's a scheduled heritage resource, it shouldn't matter whether it's inside a heritage area overlay or outside. It should be afforded the same level of protection regardless of where it is. So there were a few alignment matters that I did to try and make those two chapters line up and make sure we had activity statuses the same wording of rules, etc. The heritage area overlays, I'll go back to, so in the historic heritage chapter, what you will find are the objectives and policy direction for scheduled heritage resources regardless of where they are. So if you are in a heritage area overlay and you are dealing with or affecting a site containing a scheduled heritage resource, you would need to look at the historic heritage chapter to get your policy direction for that. The policy direction, the objectives and policies in the overlay chapters are really more specific to each of the spatial locations of the overlay. So they are really there to explain the values for which those particular heritage overlays were scheduled for. So were identified in that form. So if you have if you're affecting a scheduled heritage resource and you're outside of a heritage area overlay, you just need to look at the historic heritage chapter. That's the only place you need to go. If you're affecting a scheduled heritage resource inside a heritage area overlay, you'll need to really look at both chapters. You'll need to get policy direction from both, but the rules will all be in your overlay chapter for both. And then if you are in a heritage area overlay and there's no scheduled heritage resource on your site within 20 metres of where you're proposing to do your development, the heritage area overlay chapter really does pretty much all of the job that you need it to do. So that the two chapters are very integrated. The sites and areas of significance to Māori chapters and the notable tree chapters, you will find these particular identified features peppered all throughout the heritage area overlays. So spatially they overlap, but for those features, they are in their standalone chapters. You don't need to go look at the historic heritage chapters to find any direction on those. And then all of those chapters are generally more stringent than your Part 3 zone rules. So got those at the bottom. Might just check if there's any other clarifications on structure that you'd like me to cover at this point.
Yeah, we've got one just small matter. Thank you, Ms. Pearson. Just in terms of what you got on the slide there, historic and cultural values, I just note in the plan itself that Part 2 term or the topic is called historical and cultural values. Should it just be historic rather than historical?
There is a slight difference in, you've got the definition of historic heritage, but I think in the national planning standards, there's direction on part of it to say historical. So
that's what that should say, historical.
Historical.
Keep it as it is.
I'll look at the naming of it, but I think when we went through, there was maybe more weight to be added to just historic rather than historical, but I can look at that in terms of the correction.
Thank you.
I mean, is there a difference?
Well, yeah.
I think it's more just the national planning standards use the term historical.
Yeah.
But that doesn't.
Synonyms at this stage.
I am not aware of any definition difference between historical means something different to historic.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you.
Yes, but I suppose it potentially opens a door to a hopeful legal submission in the future. Okay, thank you. We want to give some clarification later.
Sure.
Thank you.
Right, we'll go to next slide. So moving on to the heritage area overlays, you will have seen in my Section 42A report that for simplification purposes, refer to either Part A type overlays or Part B type overlays, knowing that in the Part A type overlays, there is, A's and B's and C's, and then there are some like Rangikua, which are not a Part A or a Part B. But really the split between the two is to, try and recognise that the Part A type overlays are largely reflective of what was in the operative plan. And the operative district plan was trying to roll together a lot of different heritage tools. There were precincts, there were special purpose zones, there were lots of different tools used to manage heritage. And in the rationalisation of those different tools into heritage area overlays, generally the Part A types are the ones that were already in the operative district plan. And in terms of the spatial extent of the Part A's, I'm not aware of any, areas of contention that have been raised in evidence about the Part A's. They were not the areas that were being challenged significantly through submissions. A lot of the focus has been on the Part B type overlays, and these are areas that a lot of them were not in the operative district plan, so spatially they are new areas and have picked up more land. But the Part B type overlays have a different type of rule framework. So it's not like taking the Part A's and just expanding out those same controls to a larger spatial area. They are often focused more on managing two areas of risk. Potential undiscovered archaeological sites. So the Part B's have been placed on areas where there is a higher potential than other places in the district to find things that have not yet been uncovered or have not yet been destroyed by previous activities, and also to manage predominantly colour And if you've got any sort of, I've learned a lot from Mr. John Brown talking about, you know, if you were going to manage what was almost one of the #1 things for managing sort of the heritage character of an area, that almost more importantly than managing physically how a building is designed, the colour of that building is actually one of the key things that can either make a building feel like it's part of the heritage character or make it really stand out and be jarring to that character. So that's predominantly the two areas that the Part B overlays focus on. And for the most part, unless you're dealing with a site that contains a scheduled heritage resource, those are the only controls when we're talking about Part Bs. So my recommendations for Part Bs are a fairly light touch approach, in my view, to managing it. It's those two areas of risk, the colour and earthworks, which I'll get onto a wee bit more. Next slide, please. So, oh, too far. Yeah, so there's a lot of words up there, but the key things, I guess, to differentiate between what the rules in Part A really control versus the Part B. Part A's, there are permitted pathways for maintenance, repair, additions and alterations. There's some controls about whether you can visually see it, and it obviously, it has to be in an area that's something that's not affecting scheduled heritage resources, and you've got to comply with colour. I've put not located in the front yard. That's an oversimplification of what it actually says, which is the part of the site between the street boundary and the street facing elevation of the principal building on the site, which are the wording that we've sort of come up with to replace what I saw, and also the resource consenting team saw, as one of the more problematic phrases from the notified plan, which was the visible from a public place, and confusion about what does that mean, how public is public, how far do you have to look at, where do you have to look at from. It was a term used in the operative plan. Apparently it was quite problematic then from a consenting perspective. It got rolled over into the notified version. Still quite difficult. So the rewording there is really an attempt to make it clearer for applicants and for any user of the plan as to what that means. So the focus really is on that front yard type space. Again, that's only for Part A's. New buildings and structures restricted discretionary. That's really a recognition that new things in these Part A areas that I guess have the greatest potential for impacting the values for which that heritage overlay was identified. That is the same activity status as in the operative district plan, so that hasn't changed. And I've refined the earthworks rules. The earthworks rules across all of the overlays as notified. We're trying to pull in a lot of different ways of managing earthworks across a lot of different tools. And in discussing this quite extensively with John, rather than looking at sort of arbitrary area controls or volume controls, which aren't really tied to the risk of finding something, the actual risk of finding something is related to how deep you go, as opposed to how much earth you move. So the 500 millimetres was chosen at sort of spade depth that sort of lets people do a lot of things that they would do on the surface. You can have your gardens and you can dig basic holes. It sort of lets you do a range of things in a part of the earth that's probably already been extensively disturbed. And it's then really putting on that safety layer and say, but if you want to go deeper, if you're doing deeper excavation, deeper foundations for something, that's when you would go through the consent process to really make sure you have the right conditions to manage the risks when you're going deeper. And you can look at things through that consent process, like your earthworks methodology, your choice of site, are there options to maybe do your excavation in a different place or a different way? The consent process lets you, I guess, maybe have that fence at the top of the cliff before you start digging, as opposed to relying on the accidental discovery protocol, which is the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff once you've already found something and maybe caused it damage. And those earthworks rules are the same across Part A and Part B. Part B, really the aim of Part B is not to control maintenance, repair, additions, alterations, or new buildings or structures. They're all permitted unless you are affecting a scheduled heritage resource. So if you just happen to be in the overlay, but you're not on a site containing a scheduled heritage resource, you can build a building as a permit activity or a structure, brand new. as a permitted activity, as long as you comply with the colour standard, as we talked about. That's sort of the key thing to manage. And earthworks are the same. So I might go to the next one. And so this is just the rules for scheduled heritage resources in the historic heritage chapter. Again, these mirror what's in the overlay chapter. The idea is to try and make sure that they're effectively the same. So I've picked up there's a seismic strengthening rule and fire protection rule in both chapters to provide a pathway through for those three types of activities. The earthworks rule, as well as that's slightly different for scheduled heritage resources. That's really saying it doesn't matter how deep or shallow you're going. If you're within 20 metres, you need a resource consent. And for all of those activities, if you don't have a permitted pathway through, you're restricted discretion. And then I have saved the infrastructure provisions till last because I've really looked at it in two parts. Most of the provisions in these chapters are for dealing with just everyday landowners who own a piece of land and want to manage the buildings and activities on their site. But then you also have a set of infrastructure objectives and policies and infrastructure specific rules. And I've done quite a lot of rationalising of these as well. So infrastructure, I've really split the rules into if you're a site containing a scheduled heritage resource or not. And if you're on a site not containing a scheduled heritage resource, but you're in an overlay, Part B, permitted. And that's really, that was as notified, no one's really challenged that, so I don't really have any scope to add in extra conditions or parameters around that. For the Part A type overlays, as notified, it was fully discretionary for any type of infrastructure. And I felt like that was potentially a bit heavy-handed. And that there was an opportunity there to actually send a signal to what, if you were going to do infrastructure, what that would look like and what we actually want to encourage, what's the way you would want to do it. So in Part A type overlays, underground, ideally, the earthworks rule still applies, so underground, but not too deep. John and I have come up with a maintenance and repair upgrading rule, which allows this 1 metre from an original location. So it's recognising that existing infrastructure is there, so whatever potential impact it might have had on the heritage values of a heritage area overlay, that's already happened. But if you start moving it around, then there's the potential for it to, maybe before it wasn't blocking the facade of your, a really lovely building or a vista, but now you've moved it and it's actually blocking something else. So the 1 metre was a bit of flexibility, but not too much. And I think you'll hear from Top Energy a bit later on that they are asking for 3 metres as opposed to 1 metre, so they'd like a bit more flexibility there. I think everyone's in agreement that connections to buildings and structures for network utilities is a good thing. It allows buildings to be upgraded and connected to modern infrastructure, and it improves the chance that they are going to be reused. And new above ground infrastructure in a road reserve. So that's trying to say if you are going to put in new above ground infrastructure that's visible, the road reserve is probably the least sensitive part of a heritage area overlay. And then the infrastructure on a site containing a scheduled heritage resource, I've only put in 2 exemptions there, and the other 2 of them are the same as the Part A's. I didn't put in underground for a scheduled heritage resource because I think if it's on a site containing a scheduled heritage resource, you've got to be a lot more careful about putting anything underground, as reflected by the sort of 20 metre earthworks rule. And connections to buildings and structures, yes, I didn't put in the exemption for above ground infrastructure in a road reserve because generally there aren't scheduled heritage resources in road reserves. So it just sort of seemed unnecessary. Right, I will take you through I'm not going to spend too long on all of these because there's a lot, but I'm going to start off as I did in my 42A report with some of the maps and the different overlay areas and some of the recommendations that I'm making about changing those areas spatially. A couple of topic-wide matters that are still in contention raised by Heritage New Zealand that we will hear from tomorrow, and a really quick rundown of the overlay the different chat dogs and poles and provisions and infrastructure. So I will try and rip through these fairly quickly. Next one, please, okay. So starting off with the Manganui and Rangitoto Peninsula Heritage Area overlays, there are 2 pockets of Area A, which are all on the Manganui side. They're sort of ring fenced with some Area B on that side, and then the Rangitoto Peninsula is all Area B. And really the only recommendations that I've made here were a couple of the areas. There's a couple of areas in green on the Rangitoto Peninsula, and then there's a couple of sites in red on the Manganui side where there's some areas that John has identified spatially that weren't sort of clicking to the correct boundaries, cadastral boundaries. There was some sort of anomalies between where the lines were and where the heritage areas were. So it's really trying to correct errors and try and make things match up with boundary lines as opposed to suddenly adding in extra land. We go to the next slide. So the only change that's been recommended for Paihia, we've got 2 areas of Area A, one sort of small block in the centre. Paihia is quite hard to get clear maps of because the text tends to jump over the edges of the lines, but we've got 2 pockets of Area A, and the majority of it is the Area B that's been added. So the only new areas that I'm recommending are the addition of the Waitangi Islands, which are circled in blue, and that's a snap from John's report. I just want to flag here that we have identified a slight issue with the way the GIS layers for the heritage areas are overlapping. So when you look at the map like that, you can sort of see there's the boundary of Area A and Area B, but when you actually click on a particular property in the Area A's, it shows just in the side panel as Area A and B, and that's because instead of the GIS layer for Area B having a carve out of a hole, it's just gone over the top. So the boundaries are correct as shown there, the outlines are correct as shown there, it's just if somebody clicked on their property, it is showing up as A and B both apply, which isn't the case. So I'll be doing a Clause 16 memo on that to recommend it. It's not changing any of the boundaries, it's just making sure that only the correct notation shows up when you click on a property in the GIS. Next one, please. This is Porua Heritage Area Overlay. This is one of the more significant changes that's being recommended. And if you've got any questions specifically about why this area is coming out, it's probably best to direct those to Mr. Brown. This is the result of submissions from a range of people sort of saying that the reason for why this area was scheduled, that maybe the risks to, I guess, the things above ground and things below ground are not significant enough to justify having this overlay over the top. So John's had a relook at that and agreed to pull out some parts of it. The area left in orange is still bigger than what was in the operative district plan. So there is still an extension to it, particularly on the northern end of it. But Porua is a Part B type overlay. So unless you are on a site that's containing one of the little purple pentagons, the only controls for being in the Porua area are colour and the 500 mils. So again, this is more of one of the light touch type overlays. Next one, please. It's Te Waimati. So this is the only overlay where it's been recommended to add more land. Small bit being taken away, and the main bit is the area to the north that has been added in. This was requested by Heritage New Zealand and I think 3 different other lay submitters, and sort of the combination of the 3 of them, with some relatively detailed arguments about the heritage values of this area. Again, Te Waimati is a Part B. So the change to landowners in this area is colour and the earthworks component. We have received an email from Alan Hookway, who is a submitter, and he's not appearing at this hearing, but I guess the little inset picture there, there were some recommendations that John has made to get that lining up better with the boundary. there was no intention for Mr. Hook Place property to be included in the heritage area overlay. He thinks there are some more slight areas that need tweaking. So that's something that we will look at as part of the right of reply to make sure that those recommendations really truly line up with that property boundary. So we're aligned there. There's a few other outstanding matters. Most of them probably relate to further clarification questions that I had from Heritage New Zealand, so we'll deal with those tomorrow. Heritage New Zealand has asked for an additional new Rawani Part C to be added in, down near the hospital site and the cemetery. I'm not clear if they want that to be a heritage area or a heritage area overlay or a heritage alert area. So I will ask clarification of that tomorrow, or that might come through in their evidence. You would have seen from my report the recommendation to defer the point from Heritage New Zealand asking for a Waitangi heritage area overlay to be deferred to hearing 15B, so that be considered collectively as part of that request for a rezoning special purpose zone. And then another clarification about the islands of Moturohia, Moturua and Motukiki. Again, I'm not entirely clear from the Heritage New Zealand evidence as to whether or not they are pursuing a heritage area overlay for those islands or a heritage alert layer. That wasn't talked about in the body of their evidence, but they are still listed in the schedule at the back. So I'm not quite sure of their relief for that one, but I will clarify that with them when they appear. Next slide, please. So we still hit, these are really focusing more on matters of contention that you'll hear about in the next 2 days. Heritage New Zealand remains of the opinion that they would like blanket protection of dry stone walls across the entire district. I think the arguments they've put forward for that to align with the Whangarei district plan that they've put forward in their evidence is the same as they put forward to us in the pre-hearing meetings. There's no new information there. So at this point, my recommendation in the 42A report hasn't changed. Heritage alert layers, this was a potential alternative tool that Heritage New Zealand signalled that they were going to bring more information on in their evidence. They're asking for a non-statutory layer that doesn't have any consenting implications, but would just alert people that maybe you should go have a chat with Heritage New Zealand. The 3 areas they've nominated for that potentially are the Uru Valley, Kawakawa and Cairo. And they've included for the first time some more specific geographic extents for what they would like to pick up in those alert layers. I sort of reserved my position on that in my 42A report because I simply didn't have enough information about what they were proposing. So once I've heard from them and understand if it's just these areas or more, so maybe it could be Rawani, it could be the islands as well, then I will address that in my right of reply. And then the final area, they are still of the opinion that including a version, it would only be a one single snapshot in time of the ARC site information as a non-statutory layer on the council GIS would be beneficial. I think at this point my recommendation for the report still stands, but we'll see what comes out tomorrow. Next slide, please.